Okay, good evening. It's now the 3rd of January, but this is as festive as I get. I'm wearing my Christmas ice hockey jumper jersey. Now, there's few things I want to talk about. There's a couple of videos that I've done recently. One my Six Nations preview and one my discussion on VAR. And both are equally interesting. Now, my Six Nations preview, I went through all the Six Nations and I looked at the fact that there's only 2 coaches that are returning from last year and 4 nations have new coaches. So Italy have got a temporary coach. Wales, Ireland, and France also have new coaches. Now, what is interesting about this whole Six Nations is I think it's the most open Six Nations that we're going to have for a long time. I think every nation can beat everyone. I think Scotland, from how they came out that World Cup, are possibly the nation most vulnerable to getting the wooden spoon. Gregor Townsend is under a lot of pressure in the aftermath of the World Cup and the failure at the World Cup. If I'm honest, really poor by Scotland. And people have questioned the unstructured attack that they play, and they've also questioned the style of play not being balanced enough. So look for Gregor Townsend to be the coach most under pressure. Italy have got an interim coach. France have got Fabien Galtier. He's new to the job. Wayne Pivac, he has coached the Scarlets, but Stephen Jones, I think, is the fulcrum for that one because he obviously was the backs coach at the World Cup, replacing Rob Howley. So there's a sort of a link there. He's going to be given time. And Andy Farrell, obviously, from the Schmidt era as assistant, he knows the players. So those coaches will basically be given time to do their jobs. Eddie Jones is obviously signed until 2021. I can't see him going anywhere. He just got to a World Cup final. He wants to build on that. So I think, Gregor Townsend is the coach under the most pressure. The VAR video that I did, really interesting feedback on that. Yes, it is live. The VAR video I did yesterday and the discussion that we had, I think football authorities have gone backwards in the last 8 months with VAR. Where we were in 2018 at the World Cup in Russia, I think, was the best VAR has been, and it's got worse. Now, how do I put this? The issues with VAR in the World Cup in Russia were the time taken to come to a decision and the fans in the stadium and at home watching on TV not knowing what was going on. They were the issues that needed to be fixed. What FIFA decided to do was change some of the rules and change the remit of VAR. And the way it's been implemented is very ad hoc and, it's not been done properly, plain and simple. Fans have lost faith in the system. And it's surprising for me because football, the wealthiest sport in the world, has taken this long to bring technology into play to assist the on-field officials. Other sports with less available cash and less available capital, in that sense, have really invested in the third official, the video official, kind of the action replays and things like that, and using technology. Football has dragged its heels, and part of the reason for that was Sepp Blatter. Sepp Blatter was one of the reasons for that. He was very much against goal line tech and VAR and all these kind of things years ago. He was very openly against bringing in goal line technology, which has proven to work. I'm also surprised that, as far as we know, football hasn't reached out to other sports to ask them, how did you implement your use of video technology? How did you implement the use of a video official to assist the on-field or on-ice officials? What teething problems did you have? How did you cure those problems? What's your remit? How did you work out what the video official would look for? As far as I'm aware, the interpretation of offside has changed, but some of the decisions are farcical. 10 years ago, none of these offsides would have been offside because there's not a clear gap between the defender and the attacker. I was brought up believing that offside there had to be a clear separation between attacker and defender, and you had to be clearly past him, and there had to be a gap, a visible gap. What we're seeing at the moment is part of a body being ahead. And as I said, with the change of interpretation of a handball, anything below your shoulder, the ball hits that, regardless if it's deliberate or accidental, it's handball. So if your arm is offside, you can't score with your arm. Therefore, this part of your body is the only part of your body you can't touch the ball unless you're the goalkeeper in the box if it's not a back pass. So surely that needs to change the wording of the offside rule. I think what we've seen is it's become farcical. It's been parodied a lot online by fans. And players are losing faith with the system. Managers are losing faith with the system. The experts, the media, who've also pushed for this system, they pushed for technology. They've pushed for getting some kind of video ref. They've pushed. They've pushed for years. They've lost faith in the system. What we had in the World Cup in 2018 were the length of time taken and people not knowing what was going on as the main issues. That's all they needed to fix, was speeding up the process and also informing the TV audience and the audience in the stadium about what was going on. That's all that needed to be done, really, to really make VAR from 90% effective to pretty much 100% effectiveness, was to really iron out those little niggles. And if you will rewatch my video reviews, match reviews on the World Cup, that's the main issue, is the time taken to get to a decision. Even if it's the wrong decision, that amount of time is lost. Okay, that amount of time is lost by taking that amount of time. Sometimes it was 3-4 minutes to come to a very clear and obvious decision that should have taken 30 seconds. It shouldn't have taken that long. What then happened was the Women's World Cup, and I discussed that in the video yesterday as well. As the Women's World Cup, they brought in the goalkeeper can't leave the line when the penalty's taken, the change in the handball rule, the change in the interpretation of what is offside and the wording and how much separation, what has to be past the last defender. So it's made the system less effective, and the implementation has been so ad hoc and badly implemented that it's becoming farcical. Fans have lost faith in the system. They now want to scrap VAR. I think technology is the right way to go. I really do. I honestly believe technology is the right way to go because other sports are well ahead of football in this regard. Well ahead. Other sports are so far ahead. The rugby refs are fully mic'd up so the TV audience can hear, the stadium can hear when they're coming to review a decision as well. And the hand signals are very obvious that they are going upstairs and they are looking at the big screen and they are communicating with the video officials. And that's both in league and union. It's a far better, more open, transparent system. So if you watch rugby league or rugby union, be it club or international level, you'll hear if you're watching on the TV especially, the referees are fully mic'd up. Also, what you notice is the players are actually less abusive towards the officials. They bite their tongue a little bit more. Players have actually been sent off and suspended for abuse of officials when it comes to rugby and ice hockey. They have had lengthy suspensions for not just back chatting, but actually coming out and verbally abusing the officials. Dylan Hartley called Wayne Barnes a effing cheat, and he got a 6-week ban for that and sent off in the game. So you notice when the referees are now fully mic'd up for everyone to hear, players suddenly become less abusive and there's less dissent. This could be some way to stop the dissent and the hounding of the referees and the abuses that referees receive from football players is mic them up fully, rather than just mic them up to their other officials, where it's a closed system. Make it fully open so the TV audience can hear as well. And then I think you'll find the players behave a lot better. Rugby players behave, a lot better around officials than football players. I do think, the rugby referees are better as well. They're better communicators because, again, they're fully mic'd up. So the audience at home, the audience in the stadium can hear what's going on. And there's no hiding when a referee makes a bad decision. Craig Joubert 4 years ago at the Rugby World Cup with the Scotland-Australia game fouled up. And that was in front of a big TV audience and a big crowd as well at the stadium. Really was under the spotlight. But I do think rugby officials are better respected by the players. And generally speaking, yes, they are better than football refs. They're more accountable because you can hear what they're saying. You understand when they're telling the player that they're offside, that they're being warned for being offside and get back on side. And you can understand when they get the captains over the players involved and they actually talk to them, in a calm, measured by saying, cut that out any further, you're both going to spend 10 minutes getting a hold on the touchline. And at the end of the day, I think I think you'll find that rugby officials are respected more as well. But it's a difficult one. I mean, football refs, there is an issue recruiting them as well. There's an issue in recruiting football refs at amateur level, let alone professional level. And yes, we have seen the quality level of football refereeing, unfortunately, has declined. Players and managers have been very vocal about it, but when they're vocal in front of the media, they get a fine. So it's an interesting one. It's an unfortunate one. But no, rugby referees are generally speaking of a higher quality. There's very few bad rugby referees. When they're a bad one, you can tell. Football refs, the quality level isn't great. And is declining. There's a reason why no English referees went to the last World Cup in Russia. They just weren't deemed good enough. Rugby officials, you could say that. One or two of them are household names to rugby fans. One or two of them are very well known, probably better known than some of the players. Nigel Owens, Wayne Barnes, two really well known referees. Craig Joubert was one of the top referees as well while he was reffing. Household names, very well respected, very well known, and they've become media personalities in their own right. You could say Mark Clattenburg and Graham Poll on the footballing refereeing side, and Pierluigi Collina became a little bit of a celebrity in his time. So there's some football refs as well that have also been big personalities that are well known by fans. But to be fair, a referee should be pretty anonymous. You shouldn't have to hear him a lot in a game. When a referee is becoming the main character in a game, that's a really poor match if they're dominating the proceedings. But no, so most rugby refs are respected and loved. You don't get a lot of back chat towards them, and I can say that as an ex-rugby player. You respect the referee. If you back chat a referee, you are walking a fine line, because he can march you further down the field and you lose more territory to the opposition. It makes it harder for you to win the game. Football refs, I think, need to be firm when it comes to the abuse that they receive. I think they need to start really booking players and sending players off. They will learn eventually. But it is what it is. The VAR debate is where I think you go back to Charlie Austin's interview last season when he's saying the referees, they need help. They're clearly making a lot of mistakes. They're under a lot of pressure, but they clearly need this VAR system in as soon as possible. Why is the FA not trialling it this season? He got fined for that. Fast forward a season, and now other players are voicing their concerns about how the VAR system isn't working effectively. They're getting fined for it. So you've got to be a bit careful when you criticise the system. Go away. You can find that amateur rugby refs aren't as a good quality. They are volunteers. You have to remember at amateur level, all the officials are volunteers at that point, and they're volunteering their time. So, but you can get some pretty good ones. You can get some pretty good ones as well. I've had some bad and good, and I've had some inconsistent ones who are good one game, bad the next. But I haven't played rugby for a very, very long time. Injury ended my rugby playing days, but it was fun while I played. I found it great fun. I really enjoyed, my time being an amateur rugby player. Good bunch of lads, good camaraderie, great fun. But you've got to be able to drink. I will admit that the rugby socials are kind of fun. There's a fair bit of sauce that gets poured down your throat, and there's normally quite a bit of heavy drinking involved with the amateur scene. But it's fun being a member of a rugby club. It's great fun. It's the fun. Same with cricket clubs and football clubs and ice hockey clubs. Whatever sport club you are a member of, it can be a lot of fun. If you're in the amateur teams, it can be a lot of fun being just a member of it. The social aspect. There have been refs that have lost control of games, but you get that at the professional ranks as well. There's been some pretty bad reffing. You just got to look at some of the rugby league matches that I've covered. There's been some referees that have started to lose control of matches Same with rugby, same with ice hockey. You can see when an officiating team has actually lost control, when the players are really taking lumps out of each other above and beyond of what is normally expected in a brutal contact sport, when they really are losing control. I've seen ice hockey. I think, as you can tell with the jersey that I'm wearing, I've seen my fair share of bad ice hockey officials, which have lost control of a match, and players have just got away with all sorts of dirty, underhanded behaviour. You can normally tell with the mood of a game in the first 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 minutes about how a game is going to be officiated. And as I say, I mean, officials do take a lot of abuse online, in the media. God, this guy is really persistent, isn't he? He's just got, how many fake profiles has he got? I mean, that's 4 times. That's 4 different fake profiles he's set up, which means he's had 2 different email accounts, unless he's a YouTube Premier member or whatever it is. I don't know what it is. He's creating more viewership. All I can say is that, and more traction for the channel. So all he's actually doing is actually helping me, but it's bloody annoying having a troll. We had one the other week which just completely destroyed the channel live stream. We had to start again. But I'll say is this: if this guy really wants to troll, he's actually creating more views and more hits, which means the channel gets more traffic, which ironically helps. So he's only doing is just pissing me off by disrupting what I'm talking about, but actually he's increasing the amount of viewership, which actually helps the view figures and the view hours. So he's actually helping and not hindering as much. It's just annoying. But no, yeah, bad amateur rugby refs, you do get them. And we can discuss rugby union, rugby league, and how both sports have issues with officiating. I'm a massive rugby league fan. If you followed the channel long enough, you would have seen that I'm a massive NRL fan. And officiating, again, over the last couple of seasons, has been in the spotlight for some really bad decisions. The grand final was decided by a refereeing blunder. And I'm a Raiders fan, so I'm still a bit bitter about that. Bad decisions cost games. And the NRL as a league has come under a lot of criticism for some of the refereeing decisions over the last couple of seasons. A lot of controversy. The media really picked up on it in Australia, really gone after the officials there. I do feel sorry for officials in pro sports. It can be very lonely in the middle of the field when you've made one bad error. Craig Joubert in Rugby World Cup 4 years ago. That basically led to the end of his refereeing career. It wasn't long after that he decided, I've had enough of this, and decided to train referees rather than actually be a referee anymore. And he's a top-level referee, and he was one of the best international refs you would see. And he made a couple of bad decisions in the game of Scotland and Australia in that quarter final. And yeah, it cost Scotland a place in the semi-final and guaranteed Australia a place in the semi-final. Had they gone the other way, the Australians would have felt equally as aggrieved. Yeah, I was an official scorer for cricket as well at school. Again, mistakes happen. I mean, the Toronto Wolfpack, I mean, interesting story. They've obviously signed Sonny Bill Williams to a massive, massive contract. And of course, rugby league is a sport that does have financial issues. Big money problems. Very few clubs turn a profit. I think only 2 clubs in the Super League and I think 4 clubs in the NRL actually make any money. Most of them break even or at a loss, and it's only because of the ownership pumping money in or the amount of getting club memberships to rise that the teams are actually sort of staying afloat. Look how many teams in rugby league and the NRL have had money issues. I did the Western Suburb Magpies video last year, a year and a half ago, about how bad they were. That was a team that at the beginning of the 90s was a pretty decent team. Money killed them, the lack of. And yeah, they went down the toilet and had the 2 worst seasons in rugby league history pre-NRL. And oh God, I did a video on that, and some of the numbers are shocking how bad they were defensively. It was just unreal. They couldn't afford to keep all their good players. So money is an issue with rugby league, and it has been for quite some time. Yes, Ilya Kovalchuk has signed as a free agent for the Montreal Canadiens for league minimum contract. No, league minimum. So that's about $780,000. He's going to be a Canadian at least till the end of the season. Brendan Gallagher obviously took that hit from Ben Sherratt accidentally, a knee to the head. Both players were falling down, and Sherratt ran him over unintentionally, and it's an upper body injury. We know it's a concussion. He did look really shaky going off the ice the other night. Kovalchuk obviously was bought out by the LA Kings. He was waived for the purposes of buying out his contract. No one picked him up on the waiver wire when he was waived, but obviously he's a free agent, and Montreal need an experienced veteran winger, and Kovalchuk was available for a lot less than some of the other possibilities that are out there via trade because of the salary cap. I'm not so sure it's a good signing. I'm really not sure if it's a good signing. His time at LA was a disaster. He left the Devils 3-4 years ago under a cloud. It's a difficult one to say if it's going to work out. He hasn't played for a while. He's been a healthy scratch for most of this season. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Kovalchuk and what impact he has with the Canadians. They are a side that do like that out-and-out goal scorer, and they have done for a while. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. What position was I playing in rugby? I was a winger fullback, mostly, although I did play a bit of scrum half and inside centre and outside centre. And I actually started out in the forward packet in the under 13s, and then I moved to the wing fullback position due to an injury to a winger. And that's where I sort of stuck it out until I broke my ankle, and then I just gave it up 9 years ago. Gave up nearly 9 years ago. Injury, I had too many concussions. I had muscular injuries. I had a neck injury. Broke my ankle. So I had to give it up by the end. Body just couldn't cope with it anymore. It was bad. I was lucky that I didn't completely rupture my knee ligaments as well. So it was unfortunate that I got to the point where my body just gave up on me. And at the age of 21, 22, I was done. But at the same age, one of my friends was playing for London Irish in their front row as a starting prop. So what different career paths our lives have taken. I'm now a bin man. He's a professional rugby player. So, it's all about a bit of luck as well when you're a young player. A bit of luck in there to either get scouted and get noticed, or if you are scouted and noticed, to stay injury free for the most part. My mate Max Leaf now plays for Bath. Haven't seen him for a long time, but he's playing for Bath. He played a bit of time in Super Rugby. Pretty solid prop, to be fair. Started out as a flanker at school. What other ones? I'm half decent at cricket. I like the sport. I'm not keen on the 100 format. I've made my views clear on that regularly since it was announced a year ago by the ECB. And England's tour of South Africa is a disaster. They're all either ill or getting injured. And Rory Burns has now gone home with an ankle injury due to an accident in training playing five-a-side football. And Joe Root's come out and said, these little touch rugby and playing frisbee and football are now banned. There's been injuries galore with these non-cricket based team bonding exercises where they're playing touch rugby or frisbee or Nerf or five-a-side football or whatever it may be for years. This has been an ongoing issue for England in the training for years. They're now going, we're not doing it anymore. You shouldn't have run it in the first place. It hasn't benefited the team. In fact, it's injured a lot of players who were crucial to the team. I remember, was it last year that Bairstow broke his finger in one of these rugby passing exercises. And Jofra Archer's injured. Burns, one of our best batsmen, is injured. It's not been a great tour of South Africa this time round. I question sometimes why Joe Root is captain. I don't think he seems authoritarian enough to be captain. I think he's too nice. He's too soft. He seems like a schoolboy who's just a deer in headlights. If I'm honest, he doesn't really come across as a guy who commands respect of the dressing room, especially of the veteran players. I think he was the wrong guy to be selected captain, but I don't think there was anyone else at the time. Personally. The USA-Iran stuff. I remember, what was it, 2006, they played in the World Cup, I believe, in Germany. And I thought, Christ, this could be a political incident if it all kicks off here. I think it's getting, but bear in mind the Qatar World Cup is taking place in 2022, and there's been a lot of issues around Qatar geopolitically in that region as well, because it's a crossroads between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Qatar is trying to use the football as soft power. And they used the World Championship Athletics as soft power, and that fell flat on its face because no one turned up to watch. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. It is troubling, but you know, oh God, he's back again. He's really trying tonight. He's really trying. God, he's trying a lot. That means he's got a third email account. Took him some time to set that one up, didn't it? How long do I see the 100 ball format lasting? I don't know. The only ones that seem to be coming out in favour of it are those who are centrally contracted by the ECB. So, look, what I've seen online when they're advertising, trying to push the sponsored ads on Facebook and Twitter, the response from 95% of people is, yes, you're killing the traditional cricket fan, or those existing fans who like T20, who like the one days, who like county, who like Test cricket, are going, we're not going to watch this. Or we might boycott cricket while it continues. So actually, they risk alienating the existing fan base of the sport. And as I said in the previous live stream, the average viewership has dropped. That free-to-air cricket final that we had in this country, 9 odd million. The average viewership of the Ashes in 2005 was 15 million, and the peak it was over 23. So that's a net loss of not just hardcore fans, but casual fans as well. So this is a reactionary ploy by the ECB. They're reacting. It's knee-jerk reaction. They go, they know they're losing fans. They know that the sport is on the back foot when it comes to football at Test grounds and at county grounds and at T20 and at one days. And it's a reactionary thing because the sport is declining with its fan base on average, and teams are in trouble. And they keep trying to come up with these new formats and reformatting the T20, and you just look at the 100 and it's just makes no sense. What else have we got? Kovalchuk, we'll have to see how he fits into the team, and how they use him and how they utilize him and how they play him, bearing in mind his age as well. Bearing in mind his age. Professional cricket will never die. I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, the T20, I think, is the format that's going to be the main format going forward if the trend continues. It's where the money is. You could say having day-night tests is the way to play Test cricket going forward. Should we reduce the length of a Test match from 5 to 4 days? I would say the day-night test is the best way to revitalise Test cricket. I think T20 is possibly the most exciting format. Not all the purists agree, but you're never going to have agreement on a sport that has now 3 or 4 different. If you've got a sport that has 3 or 4 different formats, you're never going to have any one group of fans who agree on which is the best. I think that's cricket's problem, is there's too many formats, maybe. You've got 3 different World Cups, T20, one days. You've got 2 different World Cups there. You've got 3 different international formats, T20, one day, and Test. So it's one of them. I think that overcomplicates things. Yes, T20 is huge in India and the West Indies, and it's a fun format to watch. I cannot disagree with the format. I actually like T20. I think it's an exciting format to have. But one of my close family friends, who is a member of Lords, is not a fan of T20 so much, but he understands it is the future. So it's an open debate. It's a never-ending debate there when it comes to what's the best format. I find T20 exciting. I find ODIs, they can be a bit boring. I think T20s can come across as a bit fast paced at times. ODIs can be that bit bit dull. And test matches, it's a lot of tactics in there. And I mean, I can sit through a 5-day test match, no problem, but not everyone can. Some people go and sit for the odd session here or there and just, tuning on the radio. They have it as background noise on the TV when they're doing something. I could happily watch all 5 days of a test match, all 3 sessions of all 5 days. Each cricket fan is different. But the sport itself does have a lot of issues, and declining viewership and declining numbers at county games is a big problem. I would say Japan is probably the most likely Asian country to win a Football World Cup first. They've done it in the women's game, been to, I think, back-to-back finals and won one, lost one. So I think if it is to be in the men's game, I think it would be Japan. They have the league for it. They have a professional league. It's been well established for a long time. Australia technically qualify under Asia, but our Oceanic team. But I think Australia have got too much of a gap to bridge. I would think. But you never know. It all depends on what happens on the field, and with Qatar in just over 2.5 years' time, anything could happen in that World Cup. Absolutely, anything could happen in that World Cup. At the end of the day, the temperature, the heat, the conditions will have a massive impact. Do not be surprised if a dark horse outside a team actually does something at Qatar. I think the pace of the game will be slower. There'll be lots of sloppiness. The players' endurance will be tested, and a team that can adapt to those conditions the best will obviously win. I think it's, instead of just pure skill, it's going to be a team that can survive the heat and the dry heat of Qatar. I think the fact the World Cup went there was just the corruption. Obviously, we all know about why the World Cup went to Qatar in 2022, but I think it's a difficult one when it comes to an Asian country. It's a question I wasn't expecting. I will say that, but I think Japan's the most likely. Look what they did at the Rugby World Cup. Great hosts. They were great hosts, and they got to the quarterfinals, and they played very well as they play at a fast pace. So I think Japan as a nation, I think, would be the best and most likely from the Asian nations to challenge for a Football World Cup. I didn't watch the FIFA Club World Cup final, but again, I heard it was pretty dire. I'm not going to comment on where they host football events. I'm really not. I'm not gonna comment on who hosts what events. That in itself would be wrong. Bearing in mind, I like watching the Africa Cup of Nations, and Egypt and Tunisia and Morocco have hosted them in the past, and they're deserty countries. And some of those have been actually quite entertaining. But hey, you have to remember, the fixture congestion. Some of these clubs, fuck off. Yay, I'm apparently a posh twat. Fine. Please go. This guy is persistent. He's now had 6 different profiles he's set up. I mean, the guy's persistent. I mean, I think it's the same person every week who trolls. All they're doing is actually helping the viewership figures of the channel and helping with the view time. Because that's all they're doing now at this point. Really persistent now. This person must be really bored to have set up so many email accounts. Because you're only allowed 2 YouTube profiles per email account, so he's going to forget passwords at some point, or just get bored. I've watched one FIFA World Club final. I always find it a pretty poor tournament, to be brutally honest. It's an unnecessary one. It's just a money grab. The 2026, when you got USA, Mexico, and Canada. Mexico have hosted the World Cup twice before. USA have hosted in 1994. I think it's going to be a fun tournament. We know the tournament is going to be expanded as well, past 32 teams. So it's going to be interesting. There's going to be a lot of football played. The thing is, with the USA and Canada and Mexico, they've already got the stadium infrastructure there. And the MLS is actually a surprisingly fun league to watch. I've actually really enjoyed watching the MLS the last season or two. I find it quite enjoyably fun. It's a very open style of football. There's a lot of mistakes. The quality level isn't as high, technically speaking, as the European leagues, but that makes it fun because defensively it's so open. It's like watching football in the 70s with the Brazil sides that just went on all attack all the time, and the South American sides that played with flair and attack. And it is kind of fun to watch the MLS. But yeah, the standard isn't as high as the European leagues. Yes, I do think a team that isn't South American or European will win a World Cup. There's been a debate with an African team take that next step and get to a final. We've discussed Japan's chances. I think Japan's got the infrastructure in place to do it. Australia, if they put their mind to it and really got more of their top players to play in Europe, and keep. I mean, they've had some great players play for Australia. It's doable. It's not outside the realms of possibility that Australia or Japan, if they put their mind to it, could. We know that in the women's game, Japan have won the Women's World Cup. So there is a track record there with these two nations, hosting Olympic Games, hosting these big tournaments. God's sake, there's another one. I think Mexico could be another nation. Ghana have been. I think Ghana, Cameroon, Nigeria have all been pretty good nations in their time when it comes to playing football in the World Cup. I think Ghana have been the closest. Senegal have had a good run as well at times. So there are green shoots of growth when it comes to African football, but it's the corruption of the game over there. When players are saying we're not playing unless we get paid, that was a thing that happened in 2014 in Brazil. The Ghanaian squad were like, we got to get paid. The Nigerian squad will pay us, otherwise we won't play. There are issues with where the money goes. I think Mexico from CONCACAF, yes, they could do it. They have been hosts twice before. So it could be interesting if a Central American team do it. Costa Rica have obviously played well in the past as well and produced some good players. But again, it's all like hypothetically. At the end of the day, the only two continents to lift the Football World Cup are South America and Europe. And again, it's not just about the physicality. It's about, do they have the skill and the organisation? And the Nigerians in '94 had the skill, didn't have the organisation, and they were the closest that an African team has come via other than Ghana. But yeah, the West African nations seem to do pretty well. But it is what it is. I mean, this is why it's such a good debating point, because this debate's been had since the '90s about an African team getting to that World Cup final and lifting the trophy. I think it is doable. I honestly do think it is doable. But at the same time, there are those saying, "Oh, it will never happen," and there are others saying that it's doable. It's open to conjecture because we don't know what's going to happen in 2022. We don't know what's going to happen in 2026. The fact that 3 nations will be hosting the World Cup in 2026 says to me that they are definitely going to expand the tournament to more teams. And again, is that the right way to go? Is 32 the right number? I think 32 is the right number of teams to have. I mean, a year and a half ago, I watched a lot of games and put a lot of time and a lot of effort into watching all those games whilst also working. I have to admit, it was fun watching that Russia World Cup. It wasn't the best technically I've seen for skill level. I'm not going to lie there. It wasn't in that sense the best. But the stadiums were amazing. The weather actually held up pretty well. I was expecting lots of heavy thunderstorms. There's only a couple of games affected by rain. And some of the goal scoring was at the highest it ever was. How do I feel about English people supporting the other home nations in sports? That again is up for each individual to say yay or nay to. I always support the Irish, partly because of my heritage. But some people don't feel necessarily comfortable with supporting the Scots or the Welsh or the Irish when it comes to certain sports, and that's understandable. But at the same time, we do have GB and British and Irish teams like the Lions. So you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm a big fan of obviously the GB ice hockey team, and you know, I think when you have that, you know, the GB athletics team or whatever, you support the British team. But I don't know. I've never really the Scot when it comes to Scotland. I mean, yeah, I have to admit the rivalry between England and Scotland is passionate. It doesn't matter what the sport is; they just don't like each other. It's the oldest rivalry in sports. Football, rugby. It's the oldest rivalry in sports. The dislike between the two nations is there. Although in 1978, a lot of English people got behind Scotland in the Football World Cup in Argentina because they actually had a pretty good team. So it is what it is. There are people who are very supportive of the home nations. There are those that, you know, it doesn't matter if they're Welsh, English, Scottish, Irish, they don't support the other home nations as much. But it is what it is. Yeah, well, we do have a GB team in the ice hockey. We do have the GB team in the Olympics. You know, that's really interesting when you have, you know, the four home nations all, you know, contributing to a national team. The GB ice hockey team, yeah, all four, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, England, are all represented in the national team, and you know, they play really well as a unit. You've got, you know, lads who play for the Belfast Giants, Cardiff Devils. Rugby has the GB Lions. Rugby League has the GB Lions. You know, so you do get the home nations as a team. It doesn't happen often. I wish it happened more often, to be fair. But it is what it is. It's every 4 years with the Rugby Union Lions. It's been 12 years until just gone with the Rugby League Lions, and that ended in farce. And questions have obviously been asked about the selection policy of naturalised players for the Rugby League Lions that went on tour to New Zealand, Tonga, and Papua New Guinea, and got hammered in all 3 Test matches, and by PNG as well. When it comes to rugby league, it was a shambles. This latest tour, absolute shambles, losing all 3 major Test matches, being humbled in all 3 Test matches, and when you're losing to Papua New Guinea, that's just not acceptable, really. But the issue is with rugby league is that with the last 12 years, the focus has been on England. So Scotland and Wales and Ireland have been left behind with finances and development. And that was proven at the last 2 Rugby League World Cups. Is Scotland and Wales was so bad, and the last one, especially Scotland and Wales, were absolutely woeful, and they'd really taken a step back. It was shambolic, and yes, when it comes to union, the structures are better, but the money issues are still there. And this is what I was getting at with the preview for the Six Nations is we've seen the Saracens salary cap breach. How is that going to affect England? With Leicester struggling as well in the Gallagher Premiership, how is that going to affect England? And then you look at the Wales situation in the top 14 or the Pro 14, sorry, with the club game being in financial turmoil. How is that going to affect Wales? The fact they won the Six Nations with all that going on and got to a World Cup semi-final with players, even in the build-up to the World Cup, weren't sure whether they were going to be playing when they came back until very late on. The fact that group of players has got to a World Cup semi-final and won the Six Nations with their club careers in doubt tells you something. I think Union's better organised. I will admit that, but there are money issues in Union. I think the issue with rugby league is it is hindering itself by not wanting really to grow the game outside the traditional areas. You find that in Australia, and you're finding that in the UK especially, and in France. The lack of willingness, it seems, by some within the sport to grow it in non-traditional areas is killing it, because that's where the money flow problems come from. Rugby league in Australia is not as widespread as AFL. The NRL is all on the East Coast. The AFL is nationwide. And when you're trying to, compete for fans and TV revenue and youth players, you're finding that you're going to lose to the other code. It's why rugby union's got more registered clubs, more registered players, all sorts. What my 3 top sports moments of the previous decade? I think Leicester City winning the Premier League, even though I'm not a Leicester fan. That was a big thing. You've got the Leicester City Premier League. I think Jenson Button in 2009 when he won the F1 Championship. Or was that 2010? I think it was 2009 when Jenson Button won the F1. So that's the decade before. So yeah, Leicester winning the Premier League was one. I've got to think now. I think Ireland with their second Grand Slam in the Six Nations be another one. And Great Britain surviving in the World Championship ice hockey, and actually beating France in that do or die game at the end. No, I wouldn't put the Cricket World Cup up there. I really wouldn't. The Ashes in 2005 and actually multiple Ashes series since then. England winning a series or winning a World Cup wasn't as big for me. I would say the GB Ice Hockey beating France at the World Championships and securing their place for this coming World Championships. Leicester City win the Premier League, and the Irish Grand Slam. In fact, they've had 2 Grand Slams in 10 years. So I would say they were, for me, Ireland beating the All Blacks twice. I think that would be a sports moment. But yeah, no, there are clubs in France. There are 2 top clubs in France that do play in the Super League structure, but there's actually a professional league in France. The team in Canada, Toronto, and you've got the Scholars and the Broncos in London. There are other rugby league teams floating around the Midlands as well, but there is an issue with growing the game outside the M62, and that's been well documented, and that is the problem that rugby league faces. And with that grand final, the Challenge Cup final, where Catalan won in front of the lowest crowd, followed up by the second lowest crowd since the war this past season, that says there is an issue. And the RFL aren't happy with the contract with Wembley, but it runs for another 7 years. So rugby league has a problem. They used to sell out Wembley all the time, and now with 2 traditional hardcore teams going at it and they can't sell out Wembley, that tells you there's a problem. And that's the 2 lowest attendances since the war for Challenge Cup finals. Had Catalan not been in that final last year, this season just gone would have been a record low attendance. That tells you something, that attendances are falling. Money's an issue. And the fact that the RFL were basically saying to Catalan, Toulouse and Toronto, you've got to pay £500,000 to enter the competition, that didn't go down well. That made the RFL look really bad and out of touch and just not good enough. That made the sport have a bad image, really hurt. And Catalan being the defending champions of the Challenge Cup, that was a bad advert for the game. Bad advert. That didn't go down well. And then they threatened to boycott. And they did and Toronto and Toulouse did boycott. And that harmed the game. It did. It cost the sport money. And the sport's losing money. So... And rugby league is losing out to rugby union in the amount of schools that play it, registered players, registered clubs. fans, TV audience, revenues, the amount of professional players worldwide. Union is beating League hands down, and Union has its own problems with finances and structures, and that tells you something. Okay, not everyone found the 2010s as enjoyable as the 2000s, and that's again opinions. I think the fact that England are going to be playing Australia at White Hart Lane tells you something. But bearing in mind, Spurs are trying to recoup all the money on that stadium by renting it out to make as much money as possible. The stadium was a cash grab. They're not going to fill it with any trophies anytime soon. They're going to do an Arsenal. It seems they're going to have to sell Christian Eriksen because when you've been levied, Daniel Levy has done a great bit of business for himself. The team aren't going to be successful. I think Spurs have peaked now. They're not going to be where they were under Pochettino, under Mourinho. And the fact that, the stadium was late and over budget tells you all you need to know about Tottenham Hotspur. They took their eye off the ball and they needed to win trophies first before building the stadium. Arsenal had all that success before the Emirates. They've only won 3 trophies since they've been there. So that tells you all you need to know about how Arsenal have dealt with things. It's an interesting one. I would say the 2005 Ashes was up there as one of my favourites. England winning the Rugby Union World Cup 2003. I think the Canberra Raiders getting to the grand final this past year was up there for me. There's been quite some really good fun sporting events that I have enjoyed, and there's been some ones that I haven't enjoyed so much. I think the Man United-Chelsea FA Cup final a couple of years ago was possibly the worst FA Cup final I've ever seen, and I was critical of that. I think I even said it's the worst FA Cup final in living memory. I would say that the 90s for me, I think, would have been my most enjoyable decade. Maybe the 2000s, but having watched basically 28 solid years of sport, I think since the age of, 3, I've basically watched 27, 28 years solid sport. I think I would verge on the late 90s, early 2000s would be the best period of sport that I've seen. Absolutely. But I don't really have a favourite decade. I think the 2010s comes third for the whole period. But if I want to analyse 27 solid years of sport, that's kind of hard to do of what my particular favourite thing is. That's a hard one. That's a real hard one. I think I definitely enjoyed the 2002 Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City. Really enjoyed that. I watched a lot of the ice hockey of that Olympics. The 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympics I enjoyed as well. Again, enjoyed the USA-Canada gold medal match. That was a brilliant final. I really enjoyed that. But the World Championship Ice Hockey last year, I enjoyed that immensely, and Finland winning, and they were underdogs. God, this guy is persistent tonight, isn't he? He's come up with how many? Why do you think that the Cricket World Cup? Wait a moment. I mean, look, the 2000s. I would say 2006 Italy winning the Football World Cup as well was one of my enjoyable moments. Definitely, I watched a lot. I watched every single game in that World Cup, and for me, I think that was the best Football World Cup I've ever seen. Was the 2006 World Cup? I don't think you'll get better than that. Even though the 2018 World Cup had more goals, I think the 2006 World Cup, I think, was my personal favourite out of all the ones I've seen since 1994 for football. Rugby League World Cup, I would say the 2013, I think, was my favourite. Although Tonga, the Tonga-England game in the semi-final in 2017 was possibly my favourite match of all time in Rugby League in a World Cup. It's an interesting one. There's some really interesting ones to think about. but it's hard to put my finger on it because 27 years solidly watching sport, I've seen a lot of big sporting events. I think my one of the earliest sporting events was that I remember watching was the '94 Lillehammer Winter Olympics. I remember bits of Albertville in '92, but not enough to really, say it was my favourite. I remember '94 Lillehammer, '96 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, the '98 Winter Olympics in Nagano. I watched a lot of that as well. The 2000 Sydney Summer Olympics, I remember watching that a lot. That was a good fun Olympics as well. Obviously, London 2012, where I was living at the time, was on the torch route, so I got to see the Olympic torch go past my house back in 2012, and my ex-partner's mother worked on that Olympics, so I felt very much involved with that Olympics, and where my ex-girlfriend was working at the time, the road race cycling went past her workplace, so I saw her work on the telly, so I definitely felt very part of the 2012 Olympics at the time. And that was quite an enjoyable experience. But yeah, it's a difficult one, I think. Wow, 1982 World Cup, crikey! I was only 6 months older in the 1990 Football World Cup, so I can't comment on Italia '90 and Platt's goal against Belgium and Gaz's tears and that penalty shootout. So I can't comment on the 1990 World Cup. But the first World Cup I remember was the '94. I vaguely remember the '92 Euros with Sweden beating England in Gary Lineker's last international for England. And Brolin, that fat Swede, and Denmark winning the tournament after being on holiday 3 days before the tournament kicked off until Yugoslavia were kicked out because of the Balkan Wars. But I think Cameroon in Nigeria in '94 were pretty awesome. Tina Turner missing that penalty in the opening ceremony is obviously one of the more famous things from that World Cup. But the '94 World Cup wasn't a great World Cup for expansive football. It really wasn't. It was a very defensively minded World Cup. And I think that was the catalyst for the MLS to be set up. And the MLS's first decade was disastrous and nearly killed football in the US, or soccer, if you want to call it that, in the US. Ironically, it was saved by David Beckham and other European-based players going over in the mid-2000s. Saved football in North America. It was a mess. It was badly organised, badly run, no structure, financially terrible. David Beckham helped save the MLS. Pavarotti, doing Italia '90, that was again something that's quite well remembered from that tournament. It's Pavarotti, Gaz's tears, Rudi Voller's mullet, the Ruud Gullit spit on Rudi Voller. That's one of the more famous incidents from that tournament. But no, the 1990 World Cup, if you rewatch the footage of it, is one of the best World Cups of all time. '94 is one of the more boring World Cups. You're bearing in mind the US, not a footballing nation. So it was an interesting World Cup because it was going into uncharted territory, into a country that really wasn't traditionally a footballing nation. And it's an interesting one. It took a long time for the US to get decent at the sport. And the MLS, part of the reason why the US got the World Cup was the MLS and setting up a top-tier professional league. And the first decade of the MLS, I've done a video on it, it nearly went bust. David Beckham going to the US to play saved the sport. And there were but bearing in mind Pele and George Best and co had gone over in the 70s and 80s, and the league at the time failed. And there was the fear that even David Beckham was going over there, that the MLS was going to fail, and it would be an expensive failure. Yes, Jonathan Pearce was the commentator who did a fair bit of commentary out in USA '94. I have to admit, England not qualifying for the '94 World Cup. With Euro '96 2 years later, ironically, I think actually made the England team better in the 90s. Not qualifying in 94 made the England team better for Euro 96 getting to that semi-final. Because it meant changes had to happen with the squad and there had to be a clear out and a complete rebuild. And then we had possibly the best England team until about 2002. And then it sort of went wrong after that. Where we kept developing these really great players from 96 till about 2010 and couldn't, get any momentum in tournaments past the quarterfinal until this last World Cup. I wouldn't say the USA are rubbish. I think they might have peaked before the World Cup with how they were playing. Major League Rugby is entering its third season. I'm really looking forward to this upcoming Major League Rugby season. I really am. I think the US, when it comes to rugby union, I think Major League Rugby is a right step in the right direction. It's entering its third season. The league is expanding. Some big name European players are going over there to, admittedly, they're nearing the second half of their careers, but they're still able to contribute, and that's going to help grow the game. I don't know how long it takes. They're on the right path. Uruguay as well. Uruguay and the US have really massively improved in the last 4 or 5 years. Canada, however, have declined, but Brazil have also massively improved. It won't be long before Brazil are on the same wavelength either with how they're rapidly improving. But the Canadians, the Chileans have taken a step back. And I've watched a lot of the America's Rugby Championship over the last 4 or 5 years. And I've been really impressed with the improvements that the US have made and the Uruguayans have made, and the Brazilians as well, for that matter, in the last 3 or 4 years. They've made massive strides. The Canadians have gone the other way. The Canadians have really struggled. And that is surprising, considering they were actually the strongest out of the North and South American teams, other than the Argentinians until recently. Uruguay have less professional players, but that's changing as well. I think Uruguay USA is actually a really fun kind of rivalry now. It's North America versus South America. The Uruguayans doing the double over Canada as well to qualify for the World Cup. The Canadians were the last team to book their place at the World Cup. That tells you all you need to know with the Canadian struggles when it comes to rugby union in the last 5 or so years. They have really taken a backward step. And the Americans now better than them. And in the head-to-head rivalry, the Canadians have a better record against the US. But in the last 5 years, that's been switched on its head, and the US are now dominating that rivalry. The Canadians do have some issues. It's to do with the structures as well, and development programs. Obviously, rugby is a secondary sport to ice hockey and the CFL in Canada. So competing with two bigger sports on a national level is difficult, especially when 70% of Canadians have played ice hockey at some point. And I think about 50 or 60% have played Canadian football at school or at university before going to the CFL. So rugby's up against it, and you can only play in certain areas of Canada because of the weather. Winter, central Canada in winter is minus 40 degrees Celsius at times. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And yes, the South American version of Major League Rugby, debuts this coming year. So again, some really interesting developments when it comes to professional rugby union. I think that's a step in the right direction. It's a positive step in the right direction. But Major League Rugby, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to its third season. I watched most of the games of last season. I was really impressed with how a lot of the teams played. Discipline, though, I've noticed the discipline isn't great. Lots of penalties, lots of yellow and red cards for every team. Every team had poor discipline at times. So that's, I think, the big weakness is the discipline and the fitness levels. They will come. They will get better as these teams are going fully professional. They have financial backing. They've chosen the right locations to have teams. They've made sure the stadium sizes are about right. So they're not loads of empty seats. So they've chosen slightly smaller stadiums than the MLS. So that's, I think, the right move to make while the sport is developing. That's where the MLS went horribly wrong, was they had these big 50, 60, 70,000 seater stadiums and 8,000 people turning up to watch games, lots of empty seats. And that was a bad financial move there. But no, the South American Professional Rugby Club tournament is also starting. That is absolutely correct. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes, but I think it's again showing the growth of rugby union, and this is where rugby league is completely missing out. Rugby league is losing out really when it comes to the club game and international game as well. It's not even on the same page for numbers of professional players and numbers of registered players and clubs and schools involved. It's not on the same page. And while it's big in the north of England and big in Australia on the east coast, it's not the dominant sport in either country. It's same in France. It's only southwest France that really plays rugby league, and there's only a couple of professional clubs of a high enough standard to be classed as fully professional. That's Toulouse and Catalan. Other than that, they tried a team in Paris with PSG, had a team in the 90s, and that fell flat. Yes, I have watched the Canadian T20 cricket. That is kind of fun. I watched a fair bit of it this summer on Free Sports. It was fun. I will admit it was a good watch. I wasn't disappointed. Some of the Canadian players played really, really well. And this is T20, is how easy it is to play. But this is the issue though with Canadian sport. It's primarily a hockey country, and when I say hockey, I mean ice hockey. And CFL is the second sport. Oh fuck my nose! It's cold. So when Melbourne and the state of Victoria is Aussie rules country, and so the Melbourne Rebels struggle to attract fans, and Melbourne Storm, they're one of the more successful teams in the NRL in their history. They've only missed the playoffs, the finals, I think 2 or 3 times in 22 years or something silly like that. But there is an issue with both codes of rugby in the state of Victoria. It's Aussie rules and cricket country. So interesting that there are teams there, but that's to do with Murdoch. It's to do with News Corp and Rupert Murdoch. Murdoch is from Melbourne, and the Super League Wars of the 90s, the Melbourne Storm is a product of those Super League Wars in the 90s. It is interesting though that the Melbourne Rebels and the Melbourne Storm, they're still not really getting the youth link there. The fact that the Melbourne Storm have been there for over 22 years now, and there's not many players born in the state of Victoria playing in the NRL. Obviously, the majority of players are born in Queensland or New South Wales, a couple in the capital territory, like Jarrod Croker, for example. And there are some from the Western Australian territory as well. From Western Australia, South Western Australia, there's some that have been born in Perth that are playing in the NRL. The state of Victoria really surprised by the lack of local talent coming through. You would think that with the Melbourne Storm's success, that the NRL would want to build on that and grow the youth and the amateur games. So there is a playing pool, but if you haven't got the education and the schools on board wanting to develop the sport as well, it makes it more difficult going forward to grow the sport and grow the grassroots level. And this is something that Australian sport is struggling at. Is AFL is the sport. AFL is Aussie rules is the sport that's played nationwide, and a lot of people don't realise that. Just because there ain't teams in Northern Territory in the AFL or Tasmania, it's played in every territory and state. Every school seems to have an AFL team. Tasmania, it's they're mad for it in Tas. Northern Territory as well, they're mad for it. More people play in the North. I mean, I follow the Northern Territory AFL League on YouTube. I watch the games. I think I'm really surprised that especially the NRL haven't really put a development program in place for the youth clubs and amateur clubs to grow the playing pool, and because fans are turning up, they're not playing at Amy Park, an empty stadium. They're but they're also not selling it out. I always see empty seats, and for a team that consistently successful, regardless of the salary cap breach, a team that consistently good and successful to have empty seats is really surprising. Really, really surprising. And I'm really surprised that more schools haven't decided to have a player pathway program and haven't decided to at least field a team. No, I work in the day and I don't sleep at night. I try and catch sport where I can, and it's normally match replays. It's very hard to watch as much as I would like. I just follow the news feeds. I watch mostly ice hockey and rugby league. and a bit of AFL. And I try and catch what I can when I can. If I'm honest, it's not as easy as it could be. I seem to do better in the summer than winter as well for keeping up to date with the sport. But then my favourite sport isn't played, and that's ice hockey. Isn't played in the summer, which is really annoying. But I managed to catch a fair bit of the World Championships back in April, May. That was kind of fun. But no, I work early hours of the morning till mid-afternoon, and then I'm up at 4 a.m, and I'm back in from work at latest 4:30 in the afternoon. So I try and catch as much sport as I can and discuss as much as I can. I wish I could watch more sport, absolutely, and I wish I could do this full time. If this was worth doing in the sense as a full time thing, I would do it, and I would have more time to watch sport. But is what it is. Do I think Western Force will rejoin Super Rugby? No. Super Rugby's got a lot of financial issues, and it's more than just Australia. It's the whole of Super Rugby's got problems. Some Wolves have left. Western Force have gone. Melbourne Rebels might be going. The Cheetahs and the Lions have left Super Rugby and gone to the Pro 14. Super Rugby's got massive money problems. The 5 New Zealand franchises are actually struggling to fill out the stadiums. Super Rugby, I think, is slowly killing itself. Financially, it's in a mess. And what you see is the quality level of the domestic Currie Cup and ITN Cup in New Zealand and South Africa, respectively, is better, I think, and more competitive than the Super Rugby. More teams play. It's more localised, so therefore you can control cost. The Shoot Shield in Australia, the quality level is shocking for rugby union, absolutely shocking. The Sunwolves is, I don't know what's going to happen to the Sunwolves. I think Super Rugby have. I think Super Rugby overreached itself, and the fact the league is now contracted from the maximum. I think it had 18 teams at its peak. I think Super Rugby's in trouble. I don't doubt the quality level of the play. I think Super Rugby quality level is amazing. I've been really impressed by the quality level of the Super Rugby that I've seen over my lifetime. Since it first started in 1995, I've been really impressed by the quality and the skill set. Absolutely. But financially, it's overextended itself. And when you have a sports league or a sport that financially overextends itself, it starts to go horribly wrong, and then it leads to decline long term. I don't know what's going to happen with the Sunwolves as a unit, but the Japanese domestic league is pretty healthy and pretty strong. That's the basis of their national team. The domestic Japanese league is actually a pretty good league. Some pretty good players have played in it as well. Western Force, they won't rejoin Super Rugby. I think the relationship between Western Force and Rugby Australia is broken down as well with the whole Israel Folau saga and all that, and Western Force not being given the funds necessary to keep going as a whole squad. Yet the amount of money that Western Force required was given to Israel Folau in his contract, and that's blown up in Australia's face. I think rugby union in Australia has got a lot of problems, and that's not helping Super Rugby either. Massive issues with Rugby Australia and the sport as a whole. And I keep saying this every time I mention where rugby union's losing out in Australia is Cooper Cronk. That's all you need to know. That's the only name you need to hear is Cooper Cronk. Cooper Cronk used to play rugby union at youth level until the age of 18, and then he switched to rugby league. Global Rapid Rugby, wherever it is, that's the new sort of Pacific version of Super Rugby. I think there needs to be a more localized professional instead of Super Rugby, an Australian and the Pacific Islands and Hong Kong. But the domestic game in Australia is a mess. Well, I'll be watching the FA Cup. I'll watch games where I can. But again, I'm having issues with the flat. I might be moving again soon, so I'm a bit up in the air with living at the moment. There's been issues with the flat since day one where I'm living now, and I might be moving again. So we'll see. How popular is rugby in China? China didn't host the World Cup; it was Japan. So Japan. Rugby is very popular in Japan. The club game and the domestic league is actually very, very strong. There is money there. All the clubs have big corporate sponsors, so Toshiba and Toyota and Kawasaki and Yamaha and all that. They all sponsor a professional team. The crowds are pretty good as well. Turnouts are always pretty good, and what we saw at the World Cup is the Japanese really bought in. I think baseball and football are bigger sports, absolutely. They've had more long-term investment. But now Japan has hosted a Winter Olympics, Summer Olympics. It's about to host another Summer Olympics. It's had a Football World Cup. It's had a Rugby World Cup. Japan is surprisingly a sports-mad nation, and it's a big consumer of sport as well. So we'll have to see what happens going forward with Japan and rugby, but I think they've made a statement at this last World Cup, and they've been building to this for quite some time, and they're going to continue to build long term. I think Japan is going to become a force in rugby union. The infrastructure is there, the playing base is there, and rugby in Asia is quite popular. The Hong Kong Sevens. One of the historical Sevens tournaments. I think the original Sevens tournament. I think it may not be the most popular sport, but it's definitely played. It's a difficult one. Football obviously is the world global game, and cricket in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka is obviously religion. But the Japanese really bought into the Rugby World Cup. They bought into the Football World Cup when they hosted it with South Korea back in 2002. And both those nations regularly qualify for the men's tournament regularly. So they've got professional football leagues. It's a difficult one to put your finger on the pulse, but I would say that the Rugby World Cup's had a positive impact on Japan. But rugby is also now an Olympic sport, and Tokyo is hosting the Summer Olympics in 2020. So, as this year, so we'll see what happens. But it is an interesting one. I think the local involvement, the local feedback was positive. The stadiums were all full. There was hardly any empty seats. I don't think there was any a single stadium with empty seats. I think every game was a sellout. The locals really bought in to the tournament. Really bought in. The crowd numbers were really good. The atmosphere was brilliant. Much like the Football World Cup in 2002, the atmosphere was absolutely brilliant. Then I remember watching that on the TV, and the stadiums were regularly filled out with locals picking a team to follow and support. So I think rugby in Japan, I think Japan's going to be a future powerhouse in the sport. I really do. I think they're going to be a tier one nation long term. And the USA wants to aim to be like Japan. So my video about VAR, and you hope the Premier League take it down and complain about it. No, I think the VAR debate, I think 2018, the Football World Cup, they only had to fix two things: the length of time to come to a decision, and allowing the fans at home and in the stadium to understand what's going on by fully miking up the ref, so you could hear what the referees are saying constantly throughout the game. This is where rugby and other sports do that really, really well, is the referees are fully mic'd up and you can hear what they're saying. And the dissent they're shown by players is minimal. And as I said, Denton Hartley got, I think, a six-week ban before the 2015 World Cup for dissent when he called Wayne Barnes an effing cheat. And he got picked up on the mic, and Wayne Barnes said, you're off, you're done, get off, red card. And that's when he was Northampton Saints captain, and he sent him straight off for abuse of an official. I think that would solve a lot of problems. We would understand why the referee's looking at VAR. We would understand, what is the discussion point, and then fans know what's going on. What's happened in the last, I'm going to say 8 months, has been muddled thinking by FIFA, muddled thinking by the various domestic associations, cherry picking which new rules they're going to enforce and how they're going to enforce VAR and what the remits are. There isn't a universal VAR system. How it was trialled before the World Cup in 2018, only 3 nations trialled it. I think, when a World Cup final or a Champions League final or an FA Cup final, for that matter, is decided by VAR, not by the actual play of players, legitimately, or a VAR mistake, which is seeming more likely, the consequences and the embarrassment for the sport. But it's becoming parodied by fans online. It's now become a meme. It's become parodied online. It's fans were all for the tech, in previous years, and now I don't think Amazon Prime is a step forward, because you get 20 games to choose from, and you only watch 2 of them. They've got a small package, and you can only watch 2 games for a stupid amount of money. I don't think Amazon Prime is the way forward. I think free to air is the way forward, personally, and I've been very clear on that from the first day the channel was a sports channel. Was free to air is the way to go. The viewing figures back that up. The audience reach you get back that up. Having shared rights is the way to go with a lot of free to air content. That's my personal view on it. That's always been my personal view on it. And it's what it is. They technically are sponsors because they own the teams. The big companies own the teams. Free to air advertising. The advertising revenue. Free to air means it's commercial free to air TV is the way to go. It's been proven to be the way to go because people in the US have got all these streaming services. It actually costs more than regular cable. Adverts. The program's been sponsored by a company. That's how commercial free to air TV works, is advertising. It's how YouTube works. You don't have to pay for YouTube unless you want to have YouTube Premium. It's advertising. That's how it works. That's, I think, going back to basics is going to possibly reduce the cost and actually control the salaries, because the players are earning stupid amounts of money. And at the end of the day, the subscription model is failing. Netflix and Spotify are cheaper than Sky, but at the same time, you can get the free Netflix trial and the free Spotify. You get ads in that. People aren't necessarily paying for Spotify as much as you think. I have Spotify. It's free. If you pay for Spotify Premium, you skip out the ads. That's it. That's all you're doing. Spotify actually doesn't want you to click on the premium. They want the ad revenue as well. Same with YouTube. They give you premium, but in reality, it's not the same. It really isn't. YouTube works because it's technically free. The premium is for those who really can't be asked with finding an ad block. Oh yeah, you can, but then you can jailbreak Sky and not pay for it. People have been doing that for years. Chip skyboxes. It's a thing. Piracy is a thing. It's always going to be a thing. What gets me is the Mayweather McGregor fight. More people watched that illegally than paid for it. The Anthony Joshua Ruiz first match they had, the first bout, more people watched that on jailbreak devices than legally. I think Tyson Fury's what one was it? What fight was it for Tyson Fury when he became world heavyweight champion? More people watched that on jailbreak devices or illegally streamed it than paid. The pay-per-view model is dying, especially when you've already got a sports subscription. Then you've got to pay again on top of the subscription to watch a boxing match. It could be over in 30 seconds. It's a no-brainer. When I think, was it Anthony Joshua or was it? Try to remember which boxer it was. It was definitely a British boxer. I think it was Anthony Joshua. One of his fights, more people watched illegally than paid. I think it was the Ruiz Jr. when he lost. the titles. More people illegally streamed that than actually paid to watch the pay-per-view in this country. It's stupid, really. And the amount of money these companies spend in trying to shut down these streams, just make them free to air with commercial advertising. You get a bigger audience reach, and the amount of resentment there is to the pay-per-view model that you see online. Going, oh, I'm not watching. I'm not paying for that, because you can all go down the pub and watch it because the pub will have it on. That's where most boxing, when it's on pay-per-view, more people are at the pub than at home, so they're actually not making as much money. It's mad. I do not know how much Fox Sports is in America or Australia. I know Fox Sport in Australia is ad-free when you get the subscription, though. So unlike Sky Sports here, where you get laced with ads constantly and battered with them, in Australia, it's the whole, if you're watching the NRL or the AFL, you watch the whole broadcast ad-free until that match has ended. Then there's an ad break. Then there's the next match on the cycle. Something Sky could learn from. And the subscription isn't as much as Sky here. I think it's less in Australia, in real terms, than here, a lot less. And you have dedicated channels to the way they structure Fox compared to Sky here is a lot better when it comes to the Fox Sports. A lot better. But I don't know how much it costs. Do I watch NFL? Not as much as I used to. I'm slowly watching less and less as the years pass. I haven't watched any NFL this season. Not even the London Series games. I've not watched a single NFL game this season. Well, I watched the Super Bowl. I've watched every Super Bowl for 16 years. The last Super Bowl was a real bad one. The BBC should make a I do watch the NFL, but this year I haven't really found the urge to do it. I think my love for the NFL is done at this point. World Junior Hockey Championships. No, I just don't have the time. Not with my work and trying to keep this up, ticking over. The World Championships, I will try and watch the World Championships. The World Juniors, I don't really like watching junior grade sport. It's a lower quality. God, seriously. Like this troll has set up 9 different accounts. God, your life must be so dull that you have to annoy me. But all you're doing is actually increasing my viewership figures and the view watch hours. So actually you're helping the channel rather than hindering it. The World Juniors, I'm not a big fan of junior level sport. It's a lower quality. And these 18, 19-year-olds are still developing their game and their skill level. And until they reach senior level, it's not as anywhere near as good as the World Championships will be in April and May. It just won't. It's just not. But ironically, some of these players might actually be playing at the World Championships in April, May as well. It's just bizarre that you can play under 21s or under 20s or under 19s or World Juniors and actually play at the Senior World Championship ice hockey as well. It's been done before. Players have done it before. One or two of these players might get an emergency called up by an NHL team, play the stretch through to the playoffs, play in the playoffs, or play through the stretch to the end of the season, get called up by their nation for the World Championships in April, May, and play at the World Championships as well as the World Juniors. It has happened before. Hello, Jordan. How you doing? I wish I had the time to follow the World Juniors, but it's midway through the NHL season. It's midway through various sports seasons at the moment, and it's just getting the time with work and all that. But the Canadians losing 6-0 to the Russians is the big story so far out of the World Juniors. Yeah, I suppose it is more important to the North American players because obviously they're wanting to get drafted. If they have been drafted, they want to impress their NHL teams that drafted them and their coaches at AHL, ECHL level. I do get that. I understand the scorelines. There've been some big blowouts and some very high scoring games, but in reality, a lot of these players are still either in the juniors or won't be up into the NHL level for at least another year or so. Some of them haven't even been drafted yet. That's for me where I think, yes, you can enjoy it. But at the same time, it's a difficult one. But the big story to come out of this World Juniors is Canada losing 6-0 to the Russians, and the anthem controversy as well. That was the big story so far. Is all that. Going to an NHL game is the best sports experience in America. I'm not sure how that is. I want to go, obviously, to an NHL game in North America. I'm but my team is a Canadian team that I follow, so and that is a religion in Canada, is the NHL. I don't know. I mean, I've been to a fair few sporting events. The experience is down to the person and what you make of it. The pre and post match entertainment is fine. I'm there for the sport. I'm not there to watch like a stage show like the Vegas experience. Although fans have reported that Vegas has been, obviously, a breath of fresh air for the league. I go to watch the action myself. But I've been to Anfield when I was a kid, and for me, that's possibly the best sporting experience I've ever had. I've done Craven Cottage. I've done Loftus Road. I've been to Twickenham a few times. I've been to the Medeski a few times. Vicarage Road. I've been to Fratton Park. I've been to a lot of big stadiums here in England, football and rugby. I've been to Lords for the cricket. So I've been to some really historical grounds and arenas for sport. And seen some great sporting moments. I've seen some great goals. I've seen, quarterfinals of the FA Cup. I've seen Premier League football. I've seen an old cup competition in rugby union, the Tetley Cup final. Johnny Wilkinson's first piece of silverware as a player. I've seen Jimmy Anderson's first Test wicket as a cricketer at Lords against Zimbabwe. I've seen a lot of stuff, and I have to admit, seeing Jimmy Anderson's first Test wicket. In fact, I think I saw his first 10 Test wickets actually, all in the same Test match. That will stick with me. I was 13 years old and I saw his first ever Test wicket. I think with his fifth ball. I think it was his fifth ball, first Test wicket. He didn't do bad to get his first 10 wickets. I think he did that in a day. The fact that the US have been knocked out as well is a big thing because the US development program that they have in ice hockey has been producing players. Oh, go away. God, you are really persistent. You really are persistent. Like, really, really pathetic you are. Absolutely pathetic, this guy. Oh, my God. He's been persistent all night. He's been doing it for an hour and a half. He's set up 12 accounts now. Yeah, that's old. That's back in the 80s. That happened in the 80s, early 90s, I think. A player this season's had his wrist sliced open and has needed emergency surgery. Those incidents happen very, very rarely. There was a lad in the OHL who had his leg sliced open. There was a guy, I think a Toronto player, had his wrist sliced open. That rarely happens. It's a risk that's there, but it rarely happens. But it does happen, and when it does happen, it is really, really shocking. There's that, and so the semi-overhead scissor kick. Watching that game live, it was the Zlatan Ibrahimovic show. Possibly one of the more complete centre forwards football's ever seen. Not the highest goal scorer in world football, but I think one of the most complete players of the game in the last 20 years. One of the most complete players. I think he's the complete centre forward. And love him or hate him, I think his fitness levels for his age as well, and the fact that he's still playing, just tells you what you need to know about his character, his fitness levels, his it shows his commitment to the sport, and he's also got that little bit of arrogance that I think is actually, it's just Zlatan. He gets away with it without coming across as completely too arrogant. I think there's a bit of humour to Zlatan Ibrahimovic's arrogance compared to Ronaldo and Messi. I think he's the type of player that when you retire, some of the stories he will tell will probably be X-rated a little bit, but funny. Yeah, they do fight in hockey. Well, it's part of the sport. They don't fight as much at the top level as they used to, but the lower levels they still have bench clearing brawls and punch ups in the penalty box, and players getting 20-game suspensions for fighting. It happens. I suppose hockey's a sport that does have issues, though. It's not a sport that's completely immune from the problems that other sports seem to have as well. It does have issues, and it needs to get on top of some of them. Substance abuse is a big issue in ice hockey. It's a massive, massive issue. We've seen a lot of players have issues with substance abuse. So that's one of the downsides of ice hockey is the substance abuse problem. That's clearly an undercurrent there. The Finns, the Finns have got a good hockey youth program as well as the US. Fucking hell! Seriously, go away. Absolutely pathetic. No, the Finns have always had a very solid team in my lifetime, both senior level and world junior level. They've been in the production line of talent since the 70s. Same with Sweden. They've been producing high quality players for 30, 40 years. Teemu Selanne, there you go. Pekka Rinne for Nashville, goaltender. Antti Niemi, there's another goaltender. You got to look at Jari Lehtinen. Quite a few high profile. Patrick Laine. I mean, as a pure goal scorer, he's got a rocket of a shot. The issues with his game are his two-way game and bringing other players into play, but he has definitely improved his two-way game. His defensive side of the game is still not great, but bringing other players into play, he has improved that massively. He's still got a ways to go to be on the same level as an Auston Matthews drafted in the same year, for example. I think, but he has definitely improved his forecheck game. He's improved a lot his foot speed, his fitness levels. I don't think he was fully fit last year. I think last year he was playing injured. He was playing hurt. He got injured in the run up to the playoffs the year before. Played in the playoffs with a bruised foot, I believe, or a fractured in his foot. He admitted partway through last season he wasn't as fit as he could be, and I think that affected the team as a whole. But I think, okay, I think we've won 1 in 4. I think we've lost 3 out of the last 4 games. We've had a bit of a wobble. As a God, this guy is really not giving up, is he? He's really not giving up. That's what 12, 13 profiles now. He's come up with this guy. Guy is really not giving up, is he? His trial is really persistent. Matthews, actually, surprisingly, his numbers aren't as bad for giveaways and takeaways. His numbers are not as bad as you think. I think a lot of the issues with Auston Matthews was to do with Mike Babcock. Since Sheldon Keefe has become the Toronto coach, Matthews' play has actually improved. I think a lot of the issues with Auston Matthews were to do with his relationship with Mike Babcock. That clearly was a problem that was affecting his confidence, and maybe the team as a whole was the relationship with some of the star players and Mike Babcock. Babcock goes. Sheldon Keefe comes in a couple of seasons earlier than anticipated. The team massively improves. Notice how fights in American sports are encouraged, but in the UK, commentators have a fit if everyone tries a slap. I don't know. I think I don't know what it is. I think we have to look at some of the issues with sports culture. I think ice hockey is one of those sports where it's part of the culture a little bit. It's more accepted. Rugby league and rugby union, it used to be more accepted. But obviously the sport's changed and you get lengthy suspensions now. I think it's stupid. I think you sometimes just let the players have a little biff. I think fans miss that kind of punch up a little bit in rugby league and rugby union. Although in rugby league at international level, you can still fight and only get a 10-minute, sin bidding. This is where rugby league has a problem. It doesn't have a universal rule set. You've got Super League rules, NRL rules, State of Origin rules, and international rules. So you've got 4 different rule sets for rugby league. That's another hindrance to the sport. Ice hockey has a similar problem with the NHL, domestic leagues around Europe, and international and Olympic rules. So there's different rule sets for ice hockey as well. You need a universal rule set for a sport to really be global. And this is where cricket and with the different formats, there's universal rule sets for those formats. Rugby union, universal rule set. Football, universal rule set. That's why they're more popular games globally than rugby league. It's just a universal rule set whole way through. I think Patrick Liney's definitely improved as a player. I think he still has issues with his game. I think part of the problem is his fitness levels. But he's starting to score different types of goal where he's using a bit more skill than he was before. It's not just a pure slap shot, although his accuracy on his slap shot is terrifying. It's like a small cannon being released. He is very similar to Ovechkin in his goal scoring technique with the slap shot. It's one of the hardest slap shots in the game, and it's one of the most accurate slap shots in the game as well. He can create a lot of power with not a lot of backlift off his stick as well. That's what's terrifying. He can create a lot of power. His slap shot technique is brilliant. But as a junior, he wasn't actually as good as some other juniors in that draft class. But he's still a 30, 40, possibly 50 goal scorer a year. He's had less injuries than Matthews as well, so he's had more game time. He's had more playoff minutes. He's had more playoff goals. But we'll see what happens. We'll see as their careers go on, who has the better career, who lifts the Stanley Cup first, if at all, because that's a big debating point. But also there's some other players coming through. This draft is nice and deep. There's some real talent in this draft, and then after that it gets interesting because with Seattle joining in a couple of years will mean the draft gets bigger. More players are put into the draft, so we'll see what happens with ice hockey. It's definitely a sport that's growing with participation and players. So we'll see what happens there, and how Seattle joining the NHL affects the amount of European players drafted, the amount of North American players drafted. If the US program continues at the pace it's continuing at, I know they've been knocked out by Finland at the World Juniors, but we'll have to see what happens at the World Championships. And we'll have to see how many of the players drafted in this coming draft this summer actually play in the NHL in their first season. That'll be really interesting to see. Apparently, it's a much deeper draft than the previous couple, so that's going to be really interesting to see how many players are NHL ready from the get-go. I think it's going to be a high number, so that's an interesting one. But there we go. I'm going to leave that there. Interesting live stream tonight. Got some video ideas planned over the weekend, which are going to be interesting to get them off out the head onto paper onto the whiteboard. We might get the set up and do a bit of whiteboard stuff and do some more in-depth videos with lots of facts and figures and research and writing. So for now, thank you very much for watching. Obviously, once this is uploaded, you can place your thoughts below. Thanks for all the questions, really interesting questions. And of course, that troll was exceptionally persistent tonight. I think it's the same person who's been doing it for the last 2 years. I mean, they're persistent, I'll give them that, but it's just getting dull now. But YouTube has a way of being a pain in the ass for reporting these things and making it as difficult as possible to stop these bastards. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. And I will have some more videos for you very, very soon.